There is something quietly fascinating about the private world of a queen. Not the grand speeches, not the waving crowds, but the small, hidden details of daily life. What did she eat? How was it prepared? And more importantly, what rules did she expect others to follow? For Queen Elizabeth II, food was never just food. It was order. It was tradition. It was control in a life that rarely allowed anything to be uncertain. Royal chefs did not simply cook. They followed a careful system shaped by her personal habits. Some of these rules may surprise you. For example, garlic was almost completely banned in royal kitchens. Shellfish, something many people enjoy, was also avoided during official duties. And even something as simple as potatoes had strict limits. Why would such small details matter so much? As we gently explore this world, you may begin to see that these choices were not strange at all, but deeply connected to a lifetime of discipline and duty. If you enjoy learning about these hidden sides of royal life, you might consider subscribing and sharing your thoughts. Many viewers enjoy remembering where they were during key royal moments, and your memories are always welcome here. Let us begin with one of the most well-known rules. Garlic, a common ingredient in kitchens around the world, was something the Queen strongly disliked. According to former royal chefs and reports from people who worked closely with her, garlic was simply not used in meals prepared for her. The reason was not complicated. Garlic leaves a strong smell, and the Queen often met people throughout the day. Imagine shaking hands with hundreds of guests, diplomats, and leaders. Would you want even the smallest chance of discomfort in such moments? This rule, simple as it seems, shows how much she valued consideration for others. But this leads to a quiet question. How many of us think about others even in such small ways? Moving from garlic to another rule, we find her approach to shellfish. During official events or travel, shellfish was usually avoided. This was not about taste. It was about safety. Shellfish can sometimes cause food poisoning if not prepared perfectly. For most people, this risk may seem small, but for a monarch, even a small illness could disrupt important duties. State visits, meetings, ceremonies, these could not be delayed easily. So the rule became clear. Better to avoid the risk entirely. This careful thinking appeared again in her daily eating habits. The Queen was known for her preference for simple meals. She did not enjoy heavy starches. Potatoes, rice, and pasta were often limited, especially when dining alone. This may feel surprising. Many of us see such foods as comfort. But for her, meals were about balance and discipline. She preferred grilled fish or chicken, often with vegetables. One former royal chef, Darren McGrady, spoke about this in interviews. He explained that the Queen ate to live rather than living to eat. That quiet phrase reveals a great deal. Do we eat for need or for pleasure? And yet there was one small exception that brings a smile. Chocolate. The Queen had a fondness for chocolate, especially dark chocolate. Chocolate biscuit cake was one of her favourites, a recipe that became famous over time. Even in a life of rules, diati, there was room for a gentle indulgence. As we continue, another rule may seem almost unusual. The Queen preferred her fruit in very specific ways. Bananas, for example, were not simply peeled and eaten. They were cut with a knife and fork. This was not about difficulty. It was about elegance. Every action at the royal table followed a certain standard. Imagine growing up in such an environment where even the smallest gesture is guided by tradition. Would that feel comforting or restrictive? Her approach to tea also reflected her precise habits. Afternoon tea was a daily ritual. Sandwiches were cut neatly, often with the crusts removed. The fillings were simple: cucumber, smoked salmon, egg mayonnaise. But even here there were quiet rules. The bread had to be fresh, the presentation had to be perfect, and tea was always served in fine china. These details may seem small, but they created a sense of continuity in a life that was constantly changing. If you find these traditions interesting, feel free to share which one surprises you the most. Many viewers enjoy discussing these small details, as they often reveal more than grand events ever could. Now, let us turn to something even more personal. The Queen had a strong preference for locally sourced ingredients. Whenever possible, food was prepared using produce from royal estates. Vegetables from the gardens, meat from trusted sources, and seasonal ingredients were always preferred. This was not just about taste, it reflected a deeper value, respect for quality and tradition. But it also raises another thought. In a world that moves quickly, how often do we pause to value where our food comes from? As we move forward, the rules become even more intriguing. Some were shaped by health, others by etiquette, and some by a lifetime of royal training. And slowly a picture begins to form. Not of strict control, but of quiet consistency. A life where even the smallest choices were made with care. As we continue to look deeper into these quiet rules, something becomes clear. They were not random habits. They formed a pattern, a rhythm that guided each day with calm precision. One such rule involved how meat was prepared. The Queen preferred her meat to be well done. This may seem like a small detail, but in fine dining, many chefs favour rare or medium cooking for flavour. Yet in the royal kitchen, preference always came first. Former royal chef Darren McGrady shared that her meals were never about following trends. They were about consistency. The same dish prepared the same way, time after time. This brings a gentle question. In a world that constantly changes, is there comfort in sameness? Her breakfast habits also followed a steady pattern. Each morning, she would often begin with a simple bowl of cereal, sometimes Special K, odd along with tea. On occasion, she enjoyed toast with marmalade, a very traditional British choice. There was no need for variety or excitement at the start of the day. Instead, there was quiet routine. But even within this routine, there were rules. The tea had to be brewed just right. The timing, the temperature, even the way it was poured, each step mattered. Why would such care be given to something so ordinary? Perhaps because these small rituals created a sense of control in a life filled with public duty. As the day moved forward, lunch was often light. Grilled fish, chicken, or a simple salad. Again, very little starch, very little excess. It was said that when she dined alone, meals were especially plain. This may seem surprising for someone with access to the finest chefs in the world. But here is the quiet truth. Luxury, Eve for the Queen, was not about richness. It was about balance. And yet there were moments of quiet pleasure. Afternoon tea, as we mentioned earlier, was one of them. But even here, there was an unusual rule regarding sandwiches. They had to be eaten in a certain order. The savoury options came first. Only after these were finished would the sweeter items appear. Scones, cakes and pastries followed. This was not just preference. It reflected a long-standing British tradition, but it also invites a thought. How often do we rush through meals without noticing their order, their structure, their quiet rhythm? The Queen's approach reminds us to slow down. Now let us consider something even more unusual. Ice cubes. According to reports, the Queen preferred ice cubes that were shaped in a specific way. They had to be round, not square. And the reason was simple. Round ice cubes make less noise when they touch the glass. Such a small detail, yet it reflects a deep awareness of sound, of atmosphere, of experience. Imagine a quiet room, a soft conversation, and the gentle clink of ice. Even that sound was carefully considered. Does this level of detail feel excessive, or does it show a different kind of mindfulness? Her approach to seasonal eating was also very strong. The royal kitchens followed the natural cycle of the year. Strawberries were only served in summer. Certain vegetables appeared only when they were fresh. This rule was not forced. It was respected. In a time when food can be imported from anywhere at any moment, this choice feels almost old-fashioned. But perhaps there is wisdom in it. Eating with the seasons connects us to time itself. It reminds us that not everything must be available all the time. Another interesting detail involves how dishes were repeated. The Queen did not like seeing the same meal too often, especially during formal dining. While she enjoyed routine in private, official menus had to feel varied and thoughtful. Chefs kept careful records to ensure that dishes were not repeated too soon. This balance between routine and variety is quite striking. Private life was simple. Public life required change. And here, we begin to see the deeper structure of her world. There were two lives, quietly running side by side. One was personal, calm and steady. The other was public, carefully managed and always evolving. Food in many ways reflected both. If you have been enjoying this journey so far, you may wish to share your thoughts below. Which of these rules feels familiar to you and which feels surprising? Many people find comfort in routine, while others prefer change. Your perspective adds to this conversation. As we move toward the final part, the rules become even more revealing. They begin to show not just preference but character, not just habit but meaning. And perhaps in these small details we come closer to understanding a life that was both ordinary and extraordinary at the same time. As we enter the final part of this quiet journey, the rules begin to feel less like restrictions and more like reflections of a lifetime shaped by duty. One of the most revealing habits involved how the Queen approached dinner when she was alone. Unlike grand state banquets, her private dinners were often very simple. Grilled fish, a few vegetables, and perhaps fruit to finish, no heavy sauces, no rich desserts. It is almost surprising to imagine such simplicity behind palace walls. But perhaps this simplicity was a form of peace. After a day filled with voices, decisions, and constant attention, a quiet meal may have offered a moment of calm. And here, we may ask ourselves something gentle. Do we allow space in our own lives for such quiet moments? Another rule, less spoken about but equally telling, involved portion size. The Queen was known to eat small portions. She rarely overindulged, even when surrounded by elaborate meals prepared by skilled chefs. This was not about restriction, it was about moderation. In many ways, it reflected an older generation's approach to life, a belief in balance, in not taking more than needed. This idea, simple as it sounds, feels almost rare today, yet it carries a quiet strength. Moving further, there was also a rule about how food should look on the plate. Presentation mattered deeply. Meals had to be neat, carefully arranged, and visually pleasing, but not overly decorative. There was a clear line between elegance and excess. The Queen preferred dishes that looked refined but not complicated. Nothing too crowded, nothing too bold. This sense of restraint appeared again and again. Even in something as ordinary as a salad, ingredients were cut evenly. Colours were balanced. Everything had its place. Does this attention to detail reflect control or appreciation? Perhaps it is both. Another interesting detail comes from how menus were approved. The Queen would review menus in advance, often days ahead. Chefs would present options, and she would mark her choices clearly. This process ensured that nothing was left to chance. But it also reveals something deeper. Even in a life filled with uncertainty, she created small areas where decisions were clear and calm. Food became one of those areas. And then there is a rule that feels almost symbolic. No food with strong odours during official duties. This included not just garlic, but also certain spices and dishes that might linger on the breath. Again, this was not about preference alone. It was about respect for others. Meeting people from all walks of life, from different cultures and backgrounds, required sensitivity. Even something as small as a scent could affect an interaction. This level of awareness is rare. It asks us to consider how our smallest choices may affect those around us. As the years passed, these rules remained steady. They did not change with trends or fashion. They were shaped by experience and quietly carried forward. Many of these details come from royal biographers and staff who observed her daily life. Writers such as Sally Bedell Smith have described her habits as consistent and thoughtful, rather than strict or demanding. This distinction is important. The rules were not forced upon others with harshness. They were simply part of a system that worked, a system that allowed life to move smoothly, even under constant public attention. And now, as we reflect on these 9 unusual food rules, something deeper begins to emerge. They were never truly about food. They were about discipline. They were about respect. They were about creating order in a world that often felt unpredictable. Each small choice, from avoiding garlic to preferring seasonal fruit, carried a quiet purpose. Not dramatic, not loud, but steady. And perhaps that is the most powerful lesson of all. In a time where everything moves quickly, where choices are endless and often overwhelming, there is something comforting about simplicity, about knowing what you prefer, about keeping certain traditions, not because you must, but because they bring a sense of calm. The life of Queen Elizabeth II was filled with history, ceremony, and great responsibility. Yet in these small, almost hidden details, we see something very human. A person who valued routine, who found comfort in familiar tastes, who understood that even the smallest habits can shape the rhythm of a life. And as we close this story, perhaps we can carry one quiet thought with us. It is not always the grand moments that define a life. Sometimes it is the simple choices we make each day. The meals we prepare, the care we show, the balance we keep. And in those small, steady moments, we may find a kind of quiet dignity of our own.